Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. I'm Mr. Giant, and I've got some more vibe for all you here, and we continuing with Haitian Revolution, the War of Knives, and this is Extra History Part 5, man. It's ready to go. Port-au-Prince, 1796. Yes, I'm ready to vibe up on this. I hope you guys ready to vibe up. I'm really excited and ting, bruh. So, we're gonna do this here. I ain't gonna keep you too long. Follow me on Instagram. Drop comments in there. Tell me what you think. Do some criticizing. I could take it, because I want to make this a better experience for you all and for me too, because I like doing these videos. And know it's kind of rudimentary, but there's things I could improve. I know. I want to make it so that you guys could relax, get your favorite beverage, and chill and enjoy. Okay? I ain't gonna keep you too long. Let's YouTube and simmer.
Port-au-Prince, 1796. The British soldiers come
Port-au-Prince,
ashore
so we said
and
it.
die. Come ashore and die. One of the largest expeditions to this point in British history. 20,000 men and thousands of German mercenaries disembark. Within 4 months, most are cut down by yellow fever. Back in Britain, troops riot upon the announcement of a deployment to Saint-Domingue. British forces end up hiring 7,000 black mercenaries to fight for them. Some reports will claim that 60% of the British expedition, 15,000 men, will die. And those that
Wow.
make it to the interior of the island find something frightening. The troops of Brigadier General Toussaint Louverture and his ally
Toussaint
André
Louverture,
Rigaud
man.
fighting like professional soldiers.
Yeah.
They do, after all, have years of combat experience. But soon, instead of fighting the British, they will fight each other. With general emancipation declared and the departure of the Spanish, things started to level out for Toussaint. Not calm down necessarily. I mean, he was still fighting. But with the British pinned to the coast and rivals fighting low-intensity conflicts, he could turn to actually governing. He was in control of the North Province, while his ally and rival, André Rigaud, a free person of color who'd long taken part in the group's insurrection, controlled the South. Thus, the colony was essentially divided into two rival administrative centers that would ultimately come to blows in what would be known as the War of Knives. But in 1793, the word was consolidation. Finally, Toussaint had a chance to enact his vision for an integrated post-slavery society, one that brought the white, free people of color, and black populations into a peaceful, functioning whole,
Ah,
which would
see?
prove difficult.
That's the part of this history that I didn't know. I didn't know that Toussaint was trying to get people to come together of all races and thing like that. You know what I mean? They just show him as this liberator of the slaves and stuff, but they didn't tell us that he was one of those people who was trying to get everybody to come together, which is a good idea because is if you don't get everybody together, you got all these people living there, nobody's going anywhere. They have to get along somehow. It kind of reminds me of the modern day, or well, relatively modern day with Nelson Mandela and them, how you got all these different ethnicities and sects and cultures and stuff in that one area, and he wanted them to all get along and vibe up and thing. So Toussaint is doing that sort of here, right?
Part of that difficulty was that Saint-Domingue's economy was dysfunctional by design. France had wanted the colonists to be dependent on France and had therefore restricted industry to the point that the island was solely focused on producing sugar, coffee, and indigo. It was restricted from making any moves that might make it self-sufficient. In fact, it had to import food to sustain its population. So the only system that worked was
See, here's the thing. I want something about the British fight against slavery. Commend them to all ends. You know what I mean? I knew that the Arabs were enslaving people before. I mean, even in Europe, the white people enslaved white people when they captured them. Totally understand all of that there and everything. Uh, now, I lost my thought. I was thinking so much, but the emancipation happened, but the economic stronghold stayed. And I notice a lot of people are saying that the British don't get you know recognition for stopping the slave trade. But okay, here's my thing, okay, and I'm gonna say it as far as America is concerned here. How I look at it is They didn't emancipate the slave trade. They just gained a lot of white slaves because then people were getting paid, slave wages pretty much to survive back in the day. You know what I mean? So what is it? This is this modern day slavery. You work for little and nothing, you struggle, you miss one day of work, boom, you starve. And I mean, I know I work as a bagger in a grocery store. I have to keep working, even though I don't like going to work every day and dealing with the sort of things I deal with. Because people look down on people that are baggers and cashiers and stuff. They think they're nobody, you know. Uh, and it doesn't happen to me very much because of the way I speak. People kind of figure out I'm kind of educated. I'm doing it so I could do everything else, like write my novels and stuff. I could go find a big time job, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that you know what I mean. People are working for slave wage pretty much because you struggle to pay your bills. You get in debt just to pay your bills. You know what I mean? So they just gained a whole bunch of working of paid slaves. That's how I see it. You know what I mean? And the sooner everybody, all the people who doesn't have, which is a majority, come together and realize the separation is done so that certain people could stay rich. Because rich people, like really rich people, is generations. There's people that are generationally rich. You know what I mean? And if they pay you less, that means they get more, so they solidify the legacy for the children. And it's kind of like the monarchy. It's the same thing. Your children their prince, then they're going to become king, or their princess, then become queen. It's nepotism on steroids.
Was to continue producing sugar, coffee, and indigo. But a few problems there. First, the destruction of the plantation infrastructure early in the revolution meant that major rebuilding would need to take place. Second, many of those plantations still had living owners, many of them refugees, and could not simply be given away under French law. They had to be managed in trust. And finally, no one wanted to go back to doing the same awful work they'd been forced to do when they were enslaved. But Toussaint and Rigaud solved that last situation using the same means everyone in this conflict always used: military force. They used troops to force people back onto the plantations. Now,
You see what I'm saying? Now they force their own people back onto the plantations. Like I said, they paid slaves. They paid slaves.
Not slavery. It was forced work. The difference being that the workers were paid, physical punishment was forbidden, and no one's spouse or children were getting sold away. They also had rights and protections as citizens, including the right to legally marry. This is a stain on Toussaint's legacy, as were the violent repressions he unleashed on those who rose against this forced labor program. But in Toussaint's estimation, this, and other autocratic actions he would take, were necessary to guard the freedoms that they had won. He knew that Saint-Domingue, fairly or not, would be seen as a test case for abolitionism, and what happened there would send a message across the world about whether freed slaves could not only be integrated into a wider society, but could build and sustain their own government. If Saint-Domingue collapsed, not only...
Well, you see, how could they build and sustain their own society economically? Culturally it stayed because Haiti is very cultural. But how are they able to sustain the society when they still have to depend on the very people who enslaved them to begin with? They got the purse strings they hang on to the purse strings and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And we gotta learn from that. Us, like, I consider myself like a working class, hard working class man. You know what I mean? And, we all struggling. I work with people struggling, and you think, hey, what's going on here? It's like they're not holding a gun to your head. They're not, forcing you to do it physically, but economically, they're forcing you to do it. I gotta pay my rent, so I gotta go. No matter how much I dislike where I'm going, you know what I'm saying and thing. There's no time to pursue what you really like. You know what I mean? I love doing this. I'm not really making any money doing it, but I love doing it, so I do it. You know what I mean? I do other things, online storefronts and stuff like that. But I still have to work that job in order to survive. You know what I mean? But let's continue. I see. I'm drawing the parallels to how the world work now and then. See, we're making the same mistake, but we're making it look different, and we are packaging the narrative so that certain people gonna go, well, this is kind of nice. I got a job. I eating, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and then you don't really have anything else, so you work until you retire, and then you die. You know what I mean? That's how most people are living, man. It's all over the world, all over the world, and even in rich countries.
Only might slavery return. In fact, there were big whites in Paris advocating for just that. But opponents would draw the conclusion that abolition had been a mistake, and such a determination would have global consequences. And Toussaint increasingly believed he was the only one that could secure the revolution and the freedoms they'd won. As he fought the British, his power growing, he began to edge out political rivals, even allies. When one longtime rival rebelled and captured the colony's governor, accusing him of trying to reinstate slavery, Toussaint rescued the man and got named lieutenant governor for the service. During the election for the colony's representatives in France, Toussaint steered his rival to victory so that then they would be forced to live in France, far from his developing power center. He would get himself declared governor general shortly afterward. And in 1798, he started conducting his own diplomacy. He concluded a secret peace with the British, where they would withdraw their troops and naval blockade from Saint-Domingue in exchange for the return of French royalists and a promise that Toussaint would not export the uprising to Barbados. That concluded, he sent a representative to the United States, striking a deal with John Adams so the undeclared naval war between the US and France would not affect trade with Saint-Domingue. Because you see, another running theme to think about, and you're keeping track of all of these, right?
Yeah.
Was that Saint-Domingue was always a piece in a larger game. The United States was right next door, as was British Barbados, and France supported whatever leader, in their estimation, best served their interests. And that interplay of various powers sponsoring or intervening in the island's affairs will...
They're back. The leader that best served the interest. Does that sound familiar in this modern world?
Become a major part of Haitian history.
Same thing over and over and over again.
All the way to present day.
Peter.
In other words, Toussaint was increasingly behaving like the leader of an independent nation, though he did so with the veneer of French support. He was, after all, a brigadier general of the Republic, and would remain so as long as the French upheld their abolition of slavery. In fact, Toussaint had essentially ejected the previous governor. Meanwhile, relationships between Toussaint and Rigaud began to sour, partially due to that expelled governor playing political games about which one was higher ranking, and partially due to the fact that they both wanted total control. Soon, Rigaud appealed to France, casting himself as the loyal revolutionary, and Toussaint as a dictatorial usurper who wanted independence. Toussaint, by contrast, began claiming that Rigaud planned to reimpose slavery, a slander Rigaud turned back on him. Of course, neither wanted that, but there were factions on both sides willing to believe it. Toussaint had invited back many plantation owners in order to rebuild the economy.
Conspiracy
so it seemed plausible from that
Whoa,
angle.
check this vibe out. Conspiracy theories. You know what I mean? Did they call it fake news back then too? Conspiracy theories to defame the next man because you're looking for that power. Politics, man. I'm telling you, politics is a trip.
Had rebuilt the southern province with a caste system with the free people of color on top. So again, people could imagine it. Both leaders had alienated supporters with their forced work policies, and those alienated groups started believing that the other leader would never treat them like that, and both accused the other of perpetrating a race war, even though they were representatives of all of the island's groups on both sides. Strip away the rhetoric, though, and this was a struggle between two leaders for supremacy. On June 6, 1799, Rigaud sent 4,000 troops to seize several border towns and negotiate the defection of one of Toussaint's veteran regiments. The act triggered a small uprising in Toussaint's northern territory, and he dodged two assassination attempts. In one, Toussaint had his hat shot off and an aide killed. In another, his carriage was peppered with a volley of bullets, though by pure chance, he was not inside. Thus began a civil war that would come to be known as the War of Knives. And it earned that title through blood. Both sides offered no quarter, and prisoners, when taken at all, rarely lasted long. At the outset of the conflict, Rigaud's forces, better trained and equipped, made quick gains against Toussaint. But the northern general had an enormous numerical advantage, and the increasingly open support of the United States. Not only were the Americans shipping Toussaint arms, at times, the United States Navy intervened directly, providing fire support during sieges and blockading ports. The American consul even issued passports to Toussaint's ships, allowing them to pass the blockade when Rigaud's ships could not. And during this vicious fighting, one of Toussaint's commanders rose to prominence. Brigadier General Jacques Desolene, a former slave who had fought through the revolution and who was known for massacring prisoners and rebels with such vindictiveness that Toussaint censored him for it. Though in fact, it is possible Toussaint actually ordered these reprisal killings, using Desolene as a willing scapegoat to avoid ruining his carefully crafted image of generosity and kindness. The war ground to a stalemate. Rigaud besieged and pinned, but Toussaint, unwilling to expend the casualties necessary to dislodge him. And then, another commission arrived from France. Yeah, another one, announcing another change in government. General Napoleon Bonaparte had overthrown the political system and declared himself consul. His
Whew.
message? To reaffirm that
See,
in the
Napoleon
eyes
is on
of
the
France,
scene here too.
Toussaint was the leader of Saint-Domingue. The war ended basically overnight, with Toussaint allowing Rigaud to slip away into exile in France, which left Toussaint free to invade Santo Domingo, while technically still French, was still administered by the Spanish. He claimed it was to prevent his free citizens from getting kidnapped and sold into slavery there, but it may have actually been a bid to bolster his forces through liberation and control all of the island's ports. Because Napoleon's representatives also brought word of a new constitution, one that rescinded the idea that colonies should have the same laws as France. Instead, they would have special laws, tailored to their unique conditions. In other words, Napoleon planned to bring back slavery. In response, Toussaint wrote his own constitution, his own special laws, stating that Saint-Domingue was a sovereign black state, one that rejected slavery outright, and one where he was governor for life. He all but declared independence, and then prepared for invasion. Special...
Man, this was exciting, intriguing and thing. And like I said, they taught us a lot about that in school. Of course, they didn't go into the intricate details of the politics that was going on at the time. You know what I mean? So I'm hearing a little bit more here and there. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know for a fact that America was involved in that to the extent that they were. That's part of it that I don't remember learning. They probably taught us, but I just don't remember. But anyway, man, thank you all for watching this with me. I hope you guys are having a great weekend. I'm feeling great today. You know what I mean? No fever, no nothing, just a little bit of ache. But I'm feeling good today. I hope you guys are feeling good. Listen, man, take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.